A tropical low developing in the Coral Sea, potential impacts for Queensland East Coast this weekend, heat continuing across much of the eastern states. That S what we're re-examining today. Right now, conditions across Queensland couldn't be more varied. Innisfail S sitting at 36 degrees with oppressive humidity. Cairns is super humid, desperately needing rain. Townsville hit 35 degrees with 80% humidity yesterday. That's uncomfortable weather, and many of you are feeling it. Compare that to parts of New South Wales. Carqua S seeing tops of 23 degrees with strong winds that have been blowing for days on end. The contrast is significant, and it's all tied to the broader weather pattern we are about to discuss. Let me lay out what S happening meteorologically, then we'll break down the regional impacts and what you need to know. The Bureau of Meteorology is monitoring a tropical low pressure system developing in the Coral Sea. This system, designated as Invest 16U, is currently positioned northeast of Queensland. The key question everyone is asking, will this develop into a tropical cyclone? And more importantly, where is it heading? I've examined the latest model runs from Access, the GFS and the European model. There's reasonable agreement on the broad pattern, but significant uncertainty about the details. That uncertainty matters, particularly for coastal communities from Cairns down to the Sunshine Coast. The current setup shows a weak low-pressure system embedded in a monsoon trough. Sea surface temperatures in the Coral Sea are sitting at 28 to 29 degrees Celsius. That is warm enough to support tropical cyclone development. The question is whether atmospheric conditions will allow it. Upper level wind shear is the critical factor here. When you've got strong winds at different levels of the atmosphere moving in different directions, it tears apart developing systems. Right now, the shear is moderate, not low enough to guarantee development, but not high enough to prevent it either. The Access model is showing the system intensifying slightly as it tracks westward toward the Queensland coast. Peak intensity would occur Saturday into Sunday, coinciding with its closest approach to land. The European model shows a similar track, but keeps the system weaker. The GFS sits somewhere in between. What does this mean practically? If the system develops into a tropical cyclone, we're re-looking at a Category 1 or possibly Category 2 at most. That S winds up to 125 kilometres per hour at the core. Significant but not catastrophic, like Cyclone Yasi back in 2011, which reached Category 5 with winds exceeding 280 kilometres per hour. However, even if this doesn't reach cyclone strength, it's still worth your attention. Tropical lows can produce heavy rainfall, strong wind gusts and rough seas. For coastal communities, that combination creates problems regardless of whether it gets a name. Let's talk about the track uncertainty. All models show a general westward movement toward the Queensland coast this weekend, but there's a spread of about 200 kilometres in the exact landfall position. That spread is the difference between impacts in Cairns versus impacts in Townsville versus impacts further south near Mackay. Some of you are asking about comparisons to Tropical Cyclone Alfred from last year. Fair question. Alfred also developed from a monsoon trough low and moved toward the coast. The atmospheric setup is somewhat similar, but every system has its own characteristics. Alfred tracked further south. This system looks like it'll stay north of Townsville based on current indications. The steering currents are the key. There is a ridge of high pressure to the south, which is directing the low westward. If that ridge strengthens, the system gets pushed further north. If it weakens, the system could track further south. That is what we're re-watching closely over the next 24 to 48 hours. Now let's break down what this means for specific areas, starting in far north Queensland and working our way south. Cairns and the far north, you are already dealing with oppressive humidity. The monsoon trough has been sitting over the region for days. Even without the tropical low, you are seeing afternoon storms and sticky conditions. The tropical low adds another layer of concern. If the system tracks as currently modelled, Saturday afternoon through Sunday morning is your window for impacts. Heavy rainfall is the primary concern. We could see 150 to 250 millimetres across the ranges. Coastal areas might see 100 to 150 millimetres. That is significant rain in a short period. Wind gusts could reach 80 to 100 kilometres per hour along exposed coastal areas. That's enough to bring down tree branches, damage unsecured items and create hazardous conditions. If you've got anything loose around the property, secure it Friday. The storm surge risk appears low at this stage. The system isn't expected to be strong enough to generate a major surge. But king tides are occurring this weekend, which reduces the margin for error. Coastal inundation in low-lying areas is possible, particularly if heavy rainfall coincides with high tide. For those on the tablelands, rain is likely, but wind should be less of an issue. The elevation provides some protection from the worst winds. However, localised flooding is possible, particularly in creeks and rivers that are already elevated from recent rainfall, Innisfail down through to Tully. You are in the zone where impacts could be significant depending on the exact track. Mount Carbine just received 113 millimetres 2 nights ago. The ground is already saturated in many areas. Additional heavy rainfall has nowhere to go except into rivers and creeks. Monitor the flood warnings from the Bureau. If we see another 100 plus millimetres fall, minor to moderate flooding is likely across catchments that are already elevated. The Bruce Highway could see disruptions. Plan accordingly if you are travelling this weekend. Townsville and surrounding areas, you've been copping afternoon storms for days now. That pattern continues but intensifies if the low tracks close to your area. Current indications suggest you will be on the southern fringe of the main impacts. That means heavy rainfall is possible, but the worst winds should stay north of you. Still, don't be complacent. Tropical systems have a way of surprising. Have your preparations done by Friday evening. That includes securing loose items, checking your emergency supplies, and making sure you've got a way to receive warnings if the power goes out. The Whitsundays and central Queensland coast. You further south and less likely to see direct impacts from this system. However, you want to escape entirely. The monsoon trough extends south, bringing increased shower and storm activity through the weekend. Rainfall totals should be lower than further north, maybe 50 to 100 millimetres across the weekend. But storms could still be severe, with heavy rainfall rates, strong wind gusts and frequent lightning. If you are planning boating or outdoor activities, reconsider your plans. Southeast Queensland, including Brisbane and the Gold Coast. You well south of the main action, this system 1T directly impact you. However, the broader pattern brings increased humidity and afternoon storm chances through the weekend. Brisbane S already had decent rainfall this month from afternoon storms. More storms are possible Saturday and Sunday, but these will be typical summer storms rather than organised tropical rainfall. Some areas will cop a downpour, others will stay dry. That's just the nature of afternoon storm activity. The good news for Brisbane, severe weather looks unlikely through the rest of January based on current patterns. That is a welcome change after recent active weather. The Gold Coast woke to blowy conditions this morning, but cooler temperatures and sunshine. That pattern continues through the week. Afternoon sea breezes will be strong at times, but overall conditions are pleasant compared to the heat and humidity further north. Now let S shift focus to New South Wales, because while Queensland deals with tropical moisture, you're seeing a different pattern entirely. Sydney and the Central Coast are waiting for rain. Catchments need it. The dams are sitting lower than UD like this time of year. Unfortunately, this weekend doesn't bring relief. The moisture associated with the tropical low stays north. Sydney remains dry with warm days and mild nights. The Hunter Valley and North Coast see increased cloud and maybe a few light showers as moisture spreads south from Queensland. But we are talking 10 to 20 millimetres at most, not the drought-breaking rain you are hoping for. The southern tablelands and Riverina stay dry. Warm days continue with temperatures in the low to mid-30s across inland areas. Fire danger remains a consideration, particularly given the extended dry period. Check the Rural Fire Service website for current fire danger ratings. Karkua, you mentioned strong winds for days on end. That S been the pattern across elevated parts of the ranges. Those winds ease through the weekend as a weak ridge builds. Temperatures stay pleasant, low 20s during the day, down to around 13 overnight. That's comfortable sleeping weather compared to what they are dealing with up north. For Victoria, conditions remain settled through the weekend. Melbourne S been seeing warm days, hitting 32 degrees recently. That S hot for this time of year, feeling more like midsummer than late spring conditions. The weekend brings slightly cooler temperatures as an easterly change moves through. Melbourne drops back to the mid-20s degrees Saturday and Sunday. Still pleasant, but more comfortable than the recent heat. The high country has seen a few days of cooler, settled weather. That's a welcome break. However, next week brings a return to warmer, drier conditions. Bushfire danger increases again from Monday onward. If you in fire-prone areas, use this weekend to review your bushfire plan and ensure your property is prepared. Gippsland and the northeast see increased clouds Saturday as moisture spreads south from New South Wales. A few light showers are possible, but nothing significant. The main story is the temperature change, with cooler conditions Saturday before warming returns next week. Western Victoria stays dry. The Mallee and Wimmera continue with typical summer conditions. Warm days, mild nights, isolated afternoon storms possible, but most areas staying dry. South Australia, you've been the lucky ones this week. Adelaide hit 24 degrees with sunshine, perfect weather while everyone else either bakes or freezes. That pattern continues through the weekend. Mild temperatures, light winds, mostly sunny conditions. Adelaide Hills see similar conditions with slightly cooler temperatures due to elevation. The Fleurieu Peninsula benefits from sea breezes keeping temperatures pleasant. However, the inland areas tell a different story. The Riverland is hot and dry. Rainbow in the Mallee is experiencing typical summer heat. You've had no rain since late November. 3 months without decent rainfall. Gardens are struggling, dams are getting low. This weekend doesn't bring relief. The tropical moisture stays north. You remain under the influence of a ridge of high pressure that keeps conditions dry. Next week shows potential for a change as a weak trough approaches from the west. That might bring a few showers, but I'm not promising anything until we see how it develops. Western Australia, Perth has been bone dry for 3 months now. That's a significant dry spell even by Western Australian standards. Gardens are struggling. Water restrictions may come into conversation if this continues. The weekend stays dry with moderate temperatures. Perth sees mid-20s to low 30s. Sea breezes provide afternoon relief along the coast. The southwest and Great Southern regions stay dry as well. The pattern has been locked in for weeks now. Unfortunately, the models Don T show a significant change through the next 7 to 10 days. The Pilbara and Kimberley are seeing typical build-up conditions. Hot, humid, with afternoon storms possible. This is normal for late January in the far north. Rainfall totals are variable, with some areas copping decent falls from storms while others stay dry. Tasmania, you've already felt the cold air that's in place across the southern states. Hobart saw -2 degrees yesterday morning with frost across northern suburbs. That's proper cold for January. Through the weekend, temperatures moderate slightly as the air mass warms. Hobart reaches 15 to 17 degrees during the day. Still cool, but not as frigid as recent mornings. Overnight minimums stay around 5 to 8 degrees. The West Coast and Central Plateau see similar conditions, clear cold nights followed by mild days. Perfect weather if you are planning outdoor activities. Pack layers because the temperature range is significant. The Northern Territory, Darwin S, sitting at 35 degrees with high humidity. The build-up is well and truly underway. This is typical for late January. Uncomfortable, sticky, with afternoon storms building most days. The monsoon trough extends across the top end and into the Gulf country. That brings increased storm activity through the weekend and into next week. Rainfall totals will be highly variable depending on storm placement. Some areas could see 50 to 100 millimetres, others might see nothing. The Central Australia region around Alice Springs stays hot and dry. Typical summer conditions for the Red Centre. Temperatures in the high 30s to low 40s during the day, dropping to the mid-20s overnight. Now let's talk about the marine situation because this matters for anyone on the water or living on the coast. The Coral Sea sees deteriorating conditions Friday into Saturday. Seas build to 3 to 4 metres in the direct path of the tropical low. Wind gusts reach 40 to 50 knots in the strongest parts of the system. That's hazardous marine conditions. Do not venture out in small craft. The Queensland coast from Cape York down to Townsville sees rough seas Saturday and Sunday. 2 to 3 metre swells, strong winds and reduced visibility in heavy rainfall, coastal bars become dangerous. This is not the weekend for recreational fishing or boating in North Queensland waters. The Whitsundays and further south see increased swell, but conditions aren't as severe. Still, use caution. Afternoon thunderstorms can generate dangerous conditions quickly. The New South Wales coast sees moderate seas through the weekend. Nothing unusual, but standard caution applies. Check marine forecasts before heading out. Southern waters around Victoria, Tasmania and South Australia remain relatively calm through the weekend. Good conditions for those wanting to get out on the water, with light to moderate winds and seas generally under 2 metres. Let's discuss some practical considerations depending on where you are. For far north Queensland residents, this is the time to review your cyclone plan. Even if this doesn't develop into a named cyclone, the impacts can still be significant. Do you know where your emergency kit is? Torch, batteries, battery-powered radio, first aid supplies, medications, important documents in waterproof storage. Secure loose items around the property Friday, garden furniture, trampolines, tools, anything that can become a projectile in strong winds. Trim overhanging branches if possible. Clear gutters and drains so water can flow freely. Fill the bathtub with clean water before the system arrives. Gives you drinking water and flushing water if the supply gets cut. Simple preparation that makes a big difference. Charge devices, power banks, anything you might need if the power goes out. Have a plan for refrigerated medications if you without power for an extended period. If you in a caravan or temporary structure, consider relocating to solid shelter Saturday. Caravans Don T handle tropical cyclone winds well, even at Category 1 strength. For those in flood-prone areas, monitor creek and river levels. The Bureau will issue flood watches and warnings as needed. Have a plan for what you'll do if minor or moderate flooding occurs. Know your evacuation routes. Don't wait until the last minute to make decisions. Remember the State Emergency Service slogan, if it's flooded, forget it. Never drive through floodwater. It only takes half a metre of water to float a car. Floodwater is also contaminated with debris, chemicals and sewage. Not worth the risk for livestock owners in affected areas. Ensure animals have access to high ground and shelter. Move stock away from low-lying areas prone to flooding. Make sure water supplies are secure. Check fences and secure any weak points. For those further south waiting for rain, I know it's frustrating watching the north get all the moisture while you stay dry. Unfortunately, that is the pattern we are in. The monsoon trough is active across the tropics, but the subtropical ridge is keeping that moisture from spreading south. The pattern may shift late next week or into early February. Some models hint at a trough approaching from the west that could bring a change, but we're talking 7 to 10 days out. Uncertainty is high. Don't make plans based on rainfall that may or may not eventuate. In the meantime, manage water usage sensibly. Follow any local water restrictions. Check on gardens and livestock more frequently during hot days for those in fire-prone areas, particularly Victoria and southern New South Wales. Next week brings a return to warmer, drier conditions. Fire danger increases. Now is the time to review your bushfire plan. Do you know your fire danger rating for your area? The Rural Fire Service and Country Fire Authority websites have current information. On days of elevated fire danger, especially extreme or catastrophic ratings, reconsider any plans that put you in at-risk areas. If your plan is to leave early, know your trigger points. Don T. Wait for an official warning. Leaving early is always the safest option. If you replanning to stay and defend, ensure your property is properly prepared and you have the equipment and training to do so safely. Check that gutters are clear of leaves. Maintain defendable space around buildings. Have firefighting equipment ready and know how to use it. But remember, on catastrophic fire danger days, even well-prepared properties can be overwhelmed. Leaving early is the only safe option for everyone, regardless of location. This is peak summer. Heat-related illness is a real concern, particularly for older Australians. Stay hydrated, limit outdoor activity during peak heat hours, check on elderly neighbours and mates who might be doing it tough. If you've got air conditioning, use it. This isn't the time to tough it out if you're vulnerable to heat. If you don't have air conditioning, libraries, shopping centres and community centres provide cool places to spend hot afternoons. Look after pets and livestock. They need access to shade and fresh water. On extreme heat days, limit exercise for dogs. Hot concrete and asphalt burn paws. Let's address some specific questions that have come up. Someone asked about impacts in Brisbane if the system hits the Queensland coast. Based on current modelling, Brisbane is well south of direct impacts. You will see increased humidity and afternoon storm chances, but not the organised heavy rainfall associated with the tropical low itself. Standard summer weather rather than tropical cyclone impacts. Another question about whether this could behave like tropical cyclone Alfred. There are some similarities in the setup, both developing from monsoon trough lows. However, Alfred tracked further south and developed into a more significant system. Current indications suggest this stays weaker and impacts areas further north. But every system is different. We're re-monitoring closely. There's been mention of solar activity potentially intensifying weather systems. While solar flares can affect upper atmosphere conditions and create beautiful aurora displays, the link to tropical cyclone intensity isn't established in meteorological science. Tropical cyclones develop based on sea surface temperatures, atmospheric moisture, wind shear and other well understood factors. I am focusing on those proven meteorological drivers rather than speculative connections. Several people have mentioned the extended dry period across southern Australia and asked when it breaks. Honestly, I can give you a confident answer. The pattern is stubborn. The subtropical ridge is stronger than normal for this time of year, and that keeping rain-bearing systems north of your area. Climate outlooks from the Bureau suggest we're in a neutral phase, neither El Niño nor La Niña. That means less predictable patterns and more variability. Some areas get rain, others stay dry, without the coherent pattern you see during strong El Niño or La Niña events. All I can say is the pattern will change eventually. It always does. Whether that's next week or next month, we'll have to wait and see. I'll keep you informed as the models show developments. Before we wrap up, I want to address something I am seeing in weather discussions generally. There is frustration about forecast uncertainty. Why can't we be more precise? Why do models disagree? Fair questions. Weather forecasting has improved dramatically over the past few decades. 5-day forecasts today are as accurate as 3-day forecasts were 20 years ago. But there are physical limits to predictability, particularly with tropical systems. Small differences in atmospheric conditions compound over time, a slightly different position of the ridge, a slight variation in wind shear, and suddenly the system tracks 100 kilometres further south or north. That not a failure of forecasting, the nature of a chaotic system. What we can do is provide you with the most likely scenario based on current information, acknowledge the uncertainty, and update you as that uncertainty decreases. That honest forecasting. Anyone claiming perfect certainty 5 days out isn't being straight with you. So where does that leave us for this weekend? Far North Queensland faces potential impacts from a developing tropical low Saturday into Sunday. Heavy rainfall, strong winds and rough seas are likely. Preparation is warranted, panic is not. The rest of Queensland sees increased storm activity but avoids direct impacts from the tropical system. New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania continue with their current patterns, mostly dry with seasonal temperatures. Western Australia stays locked in a dry pattern. The Northern Territory sees typical build-up conditions with afternoon storms. The key message, if you are in far north Queensland, take this seriously. Do your preparations Friday. Monitor warnings from the Bureau of Meteorology. Listen to local emergency services. Have a plan and be ready to execute it if needed. For everyone else, typical summer weather continues. Manage the heat sensibly. Stay hydrated. Look after vulnerable people and animals. I'll update you as this situation develops. If there are significant changes to the forecast, I'll get that information out. Until then, check the Bureau of Meteorology website website for the latest warnings and forecasts. Their severe weather warnings page is updated regularly as conditions change. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll get through this together like we always do. Australian weather throws challenges at us, but we're a resilient bunch. You know what to do. Take care of yourselves, take care of your mates, and I'll be back